My name is Lena Carter. I'm 31 years old, and this is how I took revenge on the man who turned my life into a graveyard. It's strange, standing here, watching him stumble out of the courthouse with his tie half undone and his world collapsing around him. The cameras flash, reporters shout his name. Ethan Ward, the golden lawyer, the man everyone once trusted. Once upon a time, I trusted him too. The October air bites against my skin, but I don't shiver. I haven't felt cold in years. Not the kind that gets under your coat, the kind that gets under your skin. Every scar on my body used to burn until I learned to turn pain into armor. He doesn't see me at first. That's the irony. The man who once knew every inch of me can't even recognize me now. Not behind this calm smile, this steady breath, this quiet satisfaction. I watch him search the crowd for sympathy, for someone to save him, but the only person who could have saved him is me. And I stopped being that woman the night he buried me alive with his lies. That night is tattooed in my mind. The smell of rain, the hum of the city, the way my phone wouldn't stop buzzing with notifications. I remember sitting at my desk in the PR firm, about to leave for dinner with him, my fiancé, my future, when my assistant burst in, pale and shaking. Lena, you need to see this. There it was, my name trending on every platform, plastered beside words like fraud, scandal, embezzlement, documents leaked, emails twisted, a web of deceit that I supposedly built, and every trail, every piece of digital evidence led straight to me. But I hadn't done it. He had. Ethan, the man who whispered that I was his safe place, had used me as his scapegoat. He planted the evidence, fed the story to the press, and made sure the fall looked clean. By morning, I was out of a job. By noon, my company's board had filed charges. By night, he ended our engagement with a single message. You need help, Lena. I can't be part of this anymore. I still remember staring at those words until my vision blurred. I tried to scream, but no sound came. Everything inside me went silent. It wasn't just my career that burned that night. It was every dream, every version of myself I had ever built. They all died, and I was buried beneath their ashes. But here's what Ethan never understood. I don't stay buried. I rebuild, and I return. So when the verdict hits and he finally looks up, confusion turning into fear, our eyes meet. Just for a second. He knows. And in that second, I let myself whisper, so softly only I can hear. That night, I didn't just lose my job or my fiancé. I lost my entire sense of who I was. And that's when my revenge began. Before everything went dark, my life was ordinary in the best way. I used to wake up before sunrise, make coffee strong enough to wake the dead, and watch the city lights fade into morning from my small apartment balcony. I loved my work, the long hours, the challenge, the rhythm of building something from chaos and turning it into a story that shined. I was a senior public relations manager at Brightwell and Company, one of the biggest PR firms in New York. My job was to clean up other people's messes, crisis control, reputation management, spinning truth into something the world could forgive. I was good at it, too good maybe, because I believed that if you were honest, hardworking, and kind, the world would eventually play fair. And then there was Ethan Ward, my college sweetheart, my compass. We met in a debate class during my sophomore year. Me, nervous and over-prepared, clutching color-coded notes. Him, charming and unbothered, quoting case law like it was poetry. He smiled when I corrected him in front of the class. Later, he told me that was when he knew. We were young, broke, and fearless. We built our little world out of late-night takeout and handwritten notes slipped under each other's doors. He'd show up outside my dorm with cheap coffee and say, "Someday, we'll drink this in our own kitchen, with a view." And we did. 6 years later, in a small apartment overlooking the Hudson, I'd cook pasta on Sundays, he'd play jazz on an old speaker, and we'd dance barefoot in the kitchen. Sometimes, when he laughed, I'd think, if love has a sound, it's this. He was the kind of man people believed in, ambitious, articulate, that magnetic confidence that could talk a storm into stillness. When he got his first major client as a defense attorney, I threw him a surprise party. He kissed me and whispered, "We are going to make it, Lena. You and me. Unstoppable." I believed him. At work, I had Clara, my best friend, my anchor. We started at Brightwell together, both interns who stayed late, swapped snacks, and dreamed about running our own agency someday. Clara was the extrovert I never could be. Loud, impulsive, always the first to pull me out of my head. She was there through everything. My engagement, my promotions, the nights Ethan and I fought about his late hours. She used to tease, "You two are like a power couple from a Netflix show. You're the brains, he's the charm." I'd laugh, pretending I didn't notice how her smile sometimes faltered when she said it. Back then, I didn't see it. The tiny cracks forming beneath the surface. The way Ethan's phone started lighting up at odd hours. The way he became distant, saying work was getting intense. The way Clara started asking too many questions about him. The kind of questions you don't expect from a best friend. One night, we were out celebrating a big client win. Ethan couldn't make it. "Court prep," he said. Clara and I ordered champagne, and she toasted. To us, the women behind the men who always take the credit. She laughed afterward, but her eyes lingered on mine a little too long. I remember brushing it off, because that's what I did best. Rationalize, smooth over, control the narrative. I told myself everyone gets jealous sometimes. Everyone gets tired. But the truth was, I had started to feel something I couldn't name. A quiet ache. A sense that something in my world was shifting. There were whispers at work, too. Subtle things. A few glances when I walked into meetings. A comment I overheard about conflicts of interest. I'd ask Clara if she'd noticed anything, and she'd say, "You worry too much, Lena. You're perfect." People envy that I should have listened to my instincts instead, because a week later, Ethan started coming home later and later. His excuses neat, practiced, just believable enough. I'd wait up for him, pretending to read while he showered off the scent of someone else's perfume. Still, I clung to hope. I thought, if I just worked harder, loved better, forgave faster, I could fix it all. That's the curse of being the good one. You keep stitching wounds that others enjoy reopening. Sometimes, I look back on those nights, the quiet ones, when I'd lie beside him, tracing the outline of his shoulder against the moonlight, and wonder how someone can look so peaceful while destroying you. The memories are sharp now, like glass, but back then, they were soft, golden. I used to think I was lucky to have a man who loved me, a best friend who'd die for me, and a career that gave me purpose. I didn't know I was living in a house made of smoke, one breath away from collapse. If I had listened to my gut back then, maybe I would have seen the knife before it went in. It happened on a Tuesday. The kind of day that feels too ordinary to destroy a life. I came into the office early, coffee in one hand, portfolio in the other, ready to present a new crisis strategy for one of our biggest clients, a global fashion brand facing a plagiarism scandal. I'd spent weeks polishing the campaign, working late into the night while Ethan stayed at his firm prepping for trial. By 9 a.m., the boardroom was full. My boss, Mr. Dalton, stood at the head of the table, red-faced, silent. The air was thick, heavy. Something was wrong. When I smiled and said, "Good morning," no one replied. Dalton finally spoke. "Lena, close the door." He didn't ask me to sit. Instead, he slid a printed stack of emails across the table. My emails, my signature. They were communications with a reporter, leaking confidential data about our client's pending settlement. Attached were documents I'd supposedly sent from my work laptop. Every message time-stamped, every file traceable. "This leak cost us nearly $3 million in damages," Dalton said, his voice trembling with rage. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" I froze. The room tilted. I send these," I said, barely able to get the words out. Someone's framing me." But they'd already made up their minds. The head of IT confirmed the emails came from my IP address, my password, my system login. There were even drafts of the messages stored locally on my drive. I couldn't breathe. My mind raced through every possibility. A hack, a virus, a setup. But the more I spoke, the guiltier I sounded. Then, Dalton said something that shattered me. "We spoke to Ethan Ward. He confirmed you'd been unstable lately, distracted, emotional Ethan. He said you mentioned being overwhelmed," Dalton continued, "that you were worried about being replaced." The words hit me like a slap. Ethan was my fiancé, the man who had promised to build a life with me. Why would he say that? And then, as if the universe wanted to twist the knife, they brought in Clara, my best friend. She avoided my eyes when she sat down. Her voice trembled as she said, "Lena's been under a lot of pressure. She's been different. I thought she just needed rest." Different. That single word destroyed what was left of me, because she wasn't just testifying against me. She was validating the lie. Within an hour, my ID badge was deactivated, my email locked. Security escorted me to my office to pack my things. In silence, as if I were contagious. No one met my eyes. No one said goodbye. I packed the pieces of my life into a cardboard box, framed photos, a cracked mug Ethan had given me, Clara's old birthday card that read, "To my sister, by choice." And then I saw them. Through the glass wall, just outside my office, Ethan standing beside Clara, whispering. He reached for her arm. She smiled, small but certain. It wasn't the smile of pity. It was recognition, the kind of look only people with a secret share. My world tilted again. I wanted to scream, to smash the glass between us, to ask why, but I didn't move. I walked out instead, past their laughter, past the whispers, past the life that had just been erased. By evening, the news was everywhere. Brightwell PR manager implicated in client data leak. My name trended for 48 hours. Anonymous accounts called me a fraud, a snake, a disgrace. Clients pulled my name from every contract. Recruiters stopped replying. My phone went silent. Even Ethan disappeared. No calls, no explanations. I went to his apartment that night, desperate for some version of truth. His doorman told me, politely, that Mr. Ward was away for the weekend. He never came back. Weeks passed. I sent messages that went unanswered. I tried to fight the allegations, but no one would hire a liability. My savings drained, my reputation burned, my sanity started to blur at the edges. Then, one morning, I saw it. An engagement announcement. Ethan Ward and Clara Reynolds. A smiling photo in the society section. Her hand on his chest, his arm around her waist. The caption read, "A love built on years of friendship." That was the moment the final piece of the puzzle clicked into place. It had never been about an accident. It was a strategy. I was the collateral. I stared at their picture until my vision blurred, until the edges of their faces melted into one another. I didn't cry that night. I didn't scream. I just sat in front of the mirror, watching the woman who used to believe in goodness, the woman who'd built a life on trust and loyalty, slowly disappear. And when the reflection finally stared back, hollow-eyed and still, I couldn't tell whether I was looking at a ghost or a monster. For months, the world felt like a photograph left in the sun. Colors bled out until everything was a washed, anonymous gray. I moved into the smallest apartment I could find. One room, a kitchenette the size of a shoebox, a window that looked out over a brick wall. The landlord was kind in a practical way, like someone who's used to collecting rent from people who have already lost something. My boxes arrived in the back of a van. I pushed them into a corner and learned to live around a cardboard fort of memories. The first season was the worst. I slept with the blinds shut because light reminded me of cameras. I let my hair grow messy until I no longer recognized the woman in the mirror, then cut it short in a fit of control. My savings kept me fed, but only barely. I lived on rice, noodles, and the cheap comfort of takeout nights that used to be special. The phone rang less and less. My parents, who had once been the voice at the end of every victory, started to call only on Sundays, with a hesitance in their tone I hadn't heard since I was a teenager asking permission to go out. Eventually, their calls stopped entirely. I sat with that silence, like a patient learning to listen to an unfamiliar heartbeat. People assumed guilt the way other people assume gravity. At work, in the industry, market chatter had hardened into a verdict long before any court did. Friends I jokingly called colleagues became strangers who blinked when I walked by. Recruiters ghosted the polite emails. Even Clara's name, which used to make me smile, became the acid that burned clean through any memory of trust. The humiliation was a new language. I learned its syllables painstakingly. Depression settled in like a tenant who refused to leave. I started freelancing because shame doesn't pay the rent. In the early months, I used a string of fake names and lean biographical sketches that never mentioned Brightwell or any past glories. I wrote press releases for mom and pop startups, managed small social feeds, ghost wrote product blurbs for apps no one would ever download. It wasn't glamorous, but it was a ledger of survival. The work kept my hands busy long enough that my thoughts would stop spinning. One evening, exhausted from chasing freelance invoices, I logged into an old personal cloud account, the one I'd set up years ago for backups. I was looking for a draft of a resume, something to cobble together for a job application that no one would read. That's when I saw a folder labeled Brightwell underscore with a timestamp from months before the leak. My breath hitched. I almost closed the tab, told myself it was nothing, then clicked. Inside was a backup of my old laptop, folders, drafts, and a copy of the very file people said I'd sent. At first, my body slid into the familiar panic. This proves nothing. The metadata can be faked. Maybe it's a mirror image of what they'd already claimed. But when I opened the file properties and dug through the system logs stored with it, something cold traced down my spine. There were access logs showing edits attributed to my username, but the edits' IP addresses resolved to an office block 2 blocks from Brightwell's headquarters. There were system timestamps that had been shifted by whole hours in ways consistent with someone manipulating file headers. In a small, overlooked subfolder were copies of the draft emails, with revision notes in a user account I recognized, c.reynolds@brightwell.com. I read the notes, until my eyes blurred. Clara had not only been there when the leaks were created, she had edited the files, changed metadata, and pushed them through the system under my credentials. The evidence sat in my cloud like a sleeping animal. It breathed and it could be woken. For a long time, I sat frozen on the couch with my laptop on my knees, an avalanche of possibilities crashing into me. Expose them and watch the press devour the scandal again? Sue and drag myself through courtrooms where every loose adjective in my past would be weaponized? Leak the files anonymously and hope the truth stuck? Each option was a minefield. Each would require courage I didn't feel I had. Then I heard the rumor, then the confirmation. Ethan and Clara weren't just together. They had launched a boutique PR firm, Ward and Reynolds, strategists for the discerning client. They were out from under Brightwell's roof and under one another's name, packaging themselves as the next big thing in reputation repair. I saw their smiling faces in an industry newsletter, headshots side by side like a marriage announcement disguised as marketing. The strategies they touted in their press release were, word for word, phrasing for phrasing, ideas I had presented to clients for years, frameworks I'd sketched on napkins at midnight. Someone had repackaged my voice and sold it as theirs. That was the trigger. If the discovery of Clara's edits had been a single spark, the sight of them hand in hand on glossy paper was gasoline. I felt something inside me click into place, not an animal howl, but the cold, hard calcification of purpose. For the first time since they'd taken my life and renamed it, I had an answer. I began methodically. No dramatics, no rash notes sent to ex-lovers or friends who turned away. Those were indulgences that only fed the gossip mills. I gathered everything: cloud backups, system logs, IP traces, revision histories. The raw, digital blood that would not lie if read properly. I bought books on digital forensics, took night classes on metadata analysis, and taught myself to interpret hex dumps the way some people learn poetry. My hands, once used to crafting public narratives, learned how to parse raw technical truth. At the same time, I constructed a new identity. It was not flashy, a thin digital persona, verified by layers of plausible histories, a small business owner with a modest web presence, glowing testimonials, a LinkedIn profile scrubbed of anything that could connect to my past. I rented a P.O. box, opened a bank account in the name, ordered business cards. Everything was surgical. Everything was anonymous. Then I made the first move. I reached out to Ward and Reynolds as a client. I sent a concise, urgent email from an address no one could trace back to me, asking for help managing a brewing brand crisis. They responded within hours, eager and professional. I scheduled a consultation. I would be sitting in their office within a week, a quiet storm in a coat. Pain taught me patience, and patience became the blade I sharpened for 2 years. Revenge, it turns out, doesn't feel like fire. It feels like focus, cold, surgical, almost sacred. 2 years had passed since I disappeared. Long enough for the world to forget my name. Long enough for Ethan and Clara to polish theirs. Ward and Reynolds had become the new darling of the PR world, a visionary boutique firm known for ethical crisis management. The irony was so sharp it could have drawn blood. They had everything: clients who trusted them, investors who believed in them, awards that used to have my name attached to the same strategies. And then I came back, not as Lena Carter, the disgraced ex-employee, but as Elena Cross, founder of Vero Strategies, a supposed tech startup seeking PR representation for an upcoming launch. I wrote my first email with hands that didn't shake. They replied in 20 minutes. We met on a rainy Thursday afternoon. The office looked exactly like I imagined. Sleek glass walls, gold nameplates, and an air of curated success. I wore a dark wig and glasses, the kind that changed the shape of a face just enough. Clara greeted me first. Her smile was too bright, rehearsed. She didn't recognize me. Ethan joined moments later. Older, maybe, but still charming, still the man who could convince anyone he was the hero of the story. We shook hands. His touch was steady. Mine was ice. For the next month, I played the perfect client. I sent them detailed briefs, fake data, projections, and finally, the bait, a multi-million dollar deal with a fabricated investor group. They devoured it, signed NDAs, exchanged proposals, even sent copies of their client lists for portfolio verification. Every document they sent me went straight into a folder, evidence that they'd built their empire on stolen work. My stolen work. The metadata from my old strategies matched perfectly with theirs. Every tagline, every layout, every proprietary format copied line for line. I didn't rush it. I let them trust me. I let them relax. Because trust was the language they had once weaponized, and I'd spent years mastering it. When the time came, I flipped the switch. At 3:17 a.m. on a Wednesday, while the city slept, I scheduled a timed release, a data drop to key clients, industry journalists, Brightwell's legal team, and the securities commissions, each file meticulously arranged, proof of plagiarism, fraud, and misrepresentation, a timeline of theft, a story no PR spin could ever erase. By 9 a.m., Ward and Reynolds was trending. By noon, their biggest clients had pulled contracts. By evening, investors froze their accounts. Their empire collapsed faster than mine ever had. And I wasn't done. I sent an anonymous package to the State Fraud Division, everything they needed to open a criminal investigation. Clara's falsified invoices, Ethan's forged digital signatures, their entire digital history laid bare. Within a week, their office was raided. News vans parked outside. Reporters swarmed. Ethan tried to smile for the cameras, but his eyes were the same shade of panic I remembered from the courthouse steps. I watched it all from my apartment, calm, detached, sipping black coffee as the same media that once crucified me now devoured them. Justice had a strange, almost metallic taste. Then, one evening, my inbox pinged with a familiar name, Ethan Ward, the subject line, foreclosure, the body. Lena, I know it's you. I don't know how, but I know. Please. One meeting. No lies. No anger. I just need to understand why. For a long time, I stared at the message. My pulse didn't even quicken. There was nothing left to fear. So I said yes. We met at the same cafe where we'd once planned our wedding guest list. The irony almost made me laugh. He arrived first. No suit this time, no arrogance, just a man stripped of everything that once made him untouchable. His hair was messy, eyes hollow, hands trembling around his coffee cup. When he saw me, he stood but didn't speak. The silence between us was thick with ghosts of trust, betrayal, and everything in between. Finally, he whispered, I never meant for it to go that far. Clara, she said it was the only way. I thought I could fix it before anyone got hurt. I watched him struggle for words, for redemption. I'd imagined this moment 1,000 times, and yet it felt strangely quiet. No satisfaction, no cinematic victory, just the stillness that follows a long war. Do you know what the worst part was? I asked softly. It wasn't losing my career or my name. It was realizing I spent years loving someone who looked me in the eyes while helping destroy me. He winced, eyes wet. I did love you, Lena. Then why? He swallowed. Because she said you'd outgrown me. That you were going to leave once you made partner. I was stupid enough to believe her. I almost pitied him then. Almost. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The cafe buzzed around us. The clatter of cups, the hiss of espresso, life moving on, indifferent. It's strange how silence sounds different once you've survived it. For the first time in years, my mornings are quiet, not heavy, not hollow, just calm. I wake before sunrise, still make my coffee strong enough to wake the dead, but now I drink it in peace instead of defense. The city hums outside my window, but it no longer feels like it's breathing down my neck. It's been 8 months since Ward and Reynolds fell. Their names have become cautionary whispers in an industry that once worshipped them. The legal proceedings are ongoing. Fraud, falsified documents, tax manipulation. But I don't follow every headline anymore. I've already lived that story once. I don't need a sequel. After the dust settled, I realized something uncomfortable. Revenge doesn't fix you. It frees you, yes, but only long enough for you to see the ruins you're standing in. The night after Ethan's email, I went home, sat on the floor, and asked myself the question I'd been avoiding for years. Who am I now that I've won? The answer didn't come quickly. It arrived in fragments, in late-night ideas, in old passions I'd buried under fear. I didn't want to rebuild my old life. That version of me had believed too much in order, in fairness, in rules written by people like Ethan. I wanted something honest, something that could make use of what I'd learned the hard way. So I built something new. I became an independent consultant, not for corporations, but for people, professionals who'd been sabotaged, gaslit, discredited, whistleblowers who'd lost their jobs for doing the right thing, women who'd been silenced by men in suits with perfect smiles. I called it the Phoenix Network. My first client was a junior analyst whose boss had taken credit for her entire project. She was ready to quit the industry. By the end of our sessions, she'd filed her own patent. The next week, she sent me a message that just said, "You reminded me I wasn't crazy." That's when I knew this was what all of it had been leading to. I work from a small studio now, filled with plants, sunlight, and the quiet hum of a laptop that no longer hides secrets. On one wall hangs the framed letter Brightwell sent me on the day they fired me. The header still reads, "Termination of employment, effective immediately." Beneath it, in neat black ink, I've written my own title, "The Day I Was Reborn." Some people think it's morbid, but to me, it's a reminder that identity isn't something you lose once and forever. It's something you reclaim, piece by piece, even after they try to erase you. Sometimes I still think about Ethan and Clara. I don't feel hatred anymore, just distance. They're lessons now, not ghosts. I used to believe forgiveness meant letting people off the hook, but forgiveness isn't for them, it's for me. It's the quiet choice to stop carrying their story inside my chest. It wasn't about destroying them anymore. I tell my clients, when they ask how I moved on. It was about reclaiming myself, the woman they tried to erase. They always pause when I say that, as if trying to imagine what that reclamation feels like. I tell them it feels like breathing again, like taking back the narrative of your own name. Some nights, I still revisit the woman I was, the one standing in that glass office with a box of her life in her hands. I wish I could tell her that pain will one day become power, that the loneliness will forge something unbreakable, that one day she'll help others find their way out of the same darkness. But maybe she wouldn't have believed me. Maybe she needed to burn first. I walk different now, slower, steadier, unafraid to take up space. When I look in the mirror, I don't see the ghost or the monster anymore. Just a woman with scars that no longer ache. They shine instead, not as wounds, but as warnings, because I finally understand pain doesn't just leave marks, it leaves maps. And those maps, if you're brave enough to follow them, can lead you home. So, yes, I took revenge. But what I gained was far more dangerous than vengeance. I gained clarity. And with that, I built a life no one can steal again. The city feels smaller now. Maybe it's because I've grown. I stand across the street from the glass tower that once held my world, Brightwell and Company, my old office, the same place where I was accused, humiliated, erased. Its mirrored surface still gleams like nothing ever happened inside. People hurry through the revolving doors, new faces, new ambitions, unaware of the ghosts that linger in its reflection. I take a deep breath. The air tastes different than it used to, not sharp with panic, but clean, grounded. My heels clake against the pavement as I walk closer, stopping just where I used to stand every morning, clutching my coffee, rehearsing courage. Now, I don't need to rehearse anything. For a long moment, I just look up, at the window that once framed my old desk, the place where my life splintered. It's strange how pain leaves landmarks. Even stranger, how peace does too. I smile, not out of triumph, but out of truth. Every wound I ever carried, I whisper. Every betrayal, every humiliation became a jewel I wear proudly now. The wind shifts, carrying the city's noise, laughter, horns, footsteps, all blending into one steady rhythm, like the heartbeat of a world that kept moving even when mine stopped. And yet, somehow, I caught up. I turned to leave, one last glance at the glass facade, a mirror of the person I used to be and the one I've become. They thought they buried me in darkness, I say softly, my voice almost lost in the hum of the street. But all they did was plant me where I could grow diamonds. The camera would linger, the reflection of Lena walking away shimmering faintly in the glass, sunlight scattering across it like tiny stars. She doesn't look back, because some stories don't end where they broke. They end where you begin again. Fade out. Date.